It's yours?
Why?
Well, I've been here for a few minutes.
Is something wrong?
No, I was just... What is this?
It's a Pontiac Fiero.
Fiero. Mid-engine, right?
Yeah, fuel injected.
Oh,
Hey, want a ride?
well.
You really should know more about the cars you ticket.
So who says I'm giving you a ticket?
So who says I'm giving you a ride?
The stock Fiero rotors are a solid disc, and for the front, the rotor is integral with the hub. For the rear, they're separate pieces, but in both cases, it's solid. In the early 90s, I guess late 80s, early 90s, Pontiac's Grand Am was offered with vented discs, and I am going ahead and replacing both the front and the rears, and I'll go into more detail as to the ramifications of doing that. We've got the caliper that's going to be removed hanging from those S-hooks. The rotor is being held on by a retainer. It has to be, where is it? Right here. Yeah, that has to be removed. That'll remove the rotor. Then the Grand Am vented rotor can get mounted, and that'll be followed up with the Grand Am calipers, replacing that caliper, the Grand Am caliper for this side. Step one in a mostly completely new braking system is to get as much of the old brake fluid out as possible. I'm sure that's .3. I want the higher performance boiling resistant .4. So that's what I'm going to do, is suck out what's there and dispose of it properly. About as empty as I can get it. I marked the syringe with brake fluid on it. So now I will move to the back and remove the brake hoses. And I have nice high performance braided lines to replace them with. Alright, first thing I tried was just the tubing wrench over the line nut, and all that did was put too much load on this bracket. So the next thing I did was I attached the vice grips around the fitting of the brake hose, so I have something to hold on to. And then I put the tubing wrench on, but I felt like all I was doing was spreading the tubing wrench. It's 12 millimeter, as you can see here. So then I got out another pair of vice grips to put around the outside of the tubing wrench head to make sure it stays snug against the flats, the hex of the nut. So now we will attempt to undo this. So if I'm looking at it from the underside, I need to go counterclockwise to loosen. So that means that that will come towards me. I bought these lines from Summit. They were supposed to match, supposed to work on Fiero. I didn't check to see if they would work on the Grand Am, of which I'm replacing this with. But regardless, when I went to install them, that end is way too big to allow the hole to line up. And this is the original Fiero, so I will have to grind off, and hopefully, yeah, it should be fine. I just have to grind off enough to get it to fit on here, and it will fit. Sprayed the backside of the brake pads. Everything is back where it should be. I don't know if I mentioned, when you go to attach this fitting to the end of this brake hose, make sure that everything is loose. You certainly don't want to bind it up or cross thread it. So it's easier if that is loose. You can kind of hold the ends in alignment. Also make sure that you get both copper washers, one under the body of the hose end and one under the head of the screw that attaches it to the caliper. The screws for that hold the calipers are right down there. They've got anti-seize on the ends. So these should be dry. Because these are front axle calipers, they do not have a parking brake capability. I've just been parking this in gear because I didn't like using the parking brake because the light was really resistant to go off and stay off. Anyway, I want to get all of these cables out of the way. So in order to remove this one, looks like I need to remove this bracket, and then hopefully it will go through here, or I need to remove something up there. One of the two. We'll work on it and bring you back when I figure out what I'm going to do. So this I was able to get out of that by going through that crack with a screwdriver, and there are 3 clips that stick out. I was able to get 2 of them, and then by keeping tension on it, rotating it, and getting access to the 3rd, and the emergency brake cable is out. All right, more of the parking brake disassembly. This cable here is coming from the handle, runs along the body. And then this cable here is the one that runs to the passenger side caliper. What needs to happen is that I need to push this towards the center to get that feature clear to break this union. Pushing that together. That's it. It just pops out. So now that cable can come out of there and the caliper can come off. So, passenger side finished. That looks like it's kinked, but it's not. Even got the little rotor retainers on. So, onward and forward. Here we are on the front now, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to replace these studs, these wheel studs, for longer ones, because as you're going to see, the rotor fits over top of the hub. So I've got new hubs that have been machined, and I've got the Grand Am rotors that fit over top. So I'll be taking off the calipers and replacing this line with a braided line, this caliper with the Grand Am caliper big enough to handle the thicker vented rotor. I may not be installing the rotor and new caliper today because I need to make sure I have the right wheel stud installed before I go through all of this. So like in the back, like most disc brake setups nowadays, there are 2 screws that hold the caliper to the caliper bracket. Those come out. I'll probably also remove, while it's in place, that connection to the brake hose, and that will free that caliper and get it out of the way. Pull the dust cap off. There's a large nut with a cotter pin, and that retains the hub to the spindle. So I'll get that all off. So punched out one of these, hammered out one of these wheel studs. Note the serration at the end there. And now I'm trying to find the replacement. And online on a Pontiac Fiero forum, I was given a number, a Dorman, and I'll put the number down. I'll put dimensions. I'll put a picture of what I am buying and the pertinent dimensions and how that stacks up. Somewhere on the internet I read that there had to be some modifications made, and I kind of discovered it on mine, what I had to do at least. This caliper would not install. It was binding against some ears, and I'm going to take the caliper off and show you in a second. But we need to make sure that there is, can you see it? Yeah, there's in and out travel. There has to be some in and out float, so as the disc wears down, this can kind of get pulled in because it only has a single piston. So hopefully both sides wear, so this float allows to keep equal pressure from both pads on the rotor. So let me remove this and show you what I had to take off of the caliper. So it's kind of hard to see on this. Right there was hitting, and you can kind of see some marks, and I think it might have been hitting a little bit here too. So anyway, you can kind of see the grinding marks. That is the top one. The lower one needed a whole lot of material removed in order to clear. These castings are really strong, and that pressure in that area is not of concern, so the fact that that wall is thinner than intended is not a problem. So yeah, again, just took off quite a bit. Let me show you what a unmodified one looks like. I started grinding on that one before I remembered that I was going to take a picture of this before I ground it off, but this one's the one that's going to get more ground off. Hopefully just kind of flush it and not have to gouge in. Didn't seem to be as bad in my test fit, so we'll see. This is, by the way, is passenger side. I'm showing you on the other side where the hose hasn't been taken off, but I did have to punch out a rivet of sorts, and that was a retainer on the middle of that hose. This new hose, I suppose I could retain it through there, but there really isn't any need that I can see. We'll go through both extremes of wheel turn, and in both cases it's not, how much time do I spend at that? Not very much. I'll show you what the other side looks like. So that, all I did was punch out the center pin and then pry till the rivet kind of broke and freed up that center of the brake hose. So since these hubs are off, it's easier for me to just drive them in with a hammer and a drift from the back, and using my vise as a hard surface to do it against. So these 5 are in. I'll move on and put these 5, and then we'll put the new bearings in and mount these on the spindle. Well, it's always something. So all 4 bearings are greased. Lubricated the races that are on the pressed into the hub. And then I went to install the seal that I got the same time I ordered the bearings, and it's not right. It's too big. So let's see if I can. These are for the Grand Am. I'm pretty sure I did not order. No, I'm sorry. These are for the Fiero and the Grand Am, the bearings. I would have thought that the seal rings would have been the same for the two as well. But I think because it's kind of based on a little bit larger than the bearing OD. So anyway, we'll do a little research, come up with the right ones, get them on order. Because I can't install the hubs until the seal is on, because it's facing towards the spindle. The knuckle. The front end has been put back together with the Grand Am calipers, Grand Am rotor, and the cut down, turned down Fiero rotor with new bearings, which I haven't fully torqued yet. That's why that cap is partially on and off. I've bled as much of the old brake fluid out as possible and pumped some more, trying to get all of the, what I'm sure is original .3 brake fluid out and going with the higher performance .4. This one, I was going to say, yeah, it seems to turn freely. I hear a little bit of rub between the pads and the disc, and that's to be expected. But the fronts are another story. They're really locked down. So I'm going to take the caliper off and see if I can figure out where it is binding. I'll also do some research online, see if anybody else has had this issue with the Grand Am brakes and what they did to solve it. I reinstalled the caliper without brake shoes, and I bolted the rotor snug against the hub, and I can't move it. So the issue is an interference between the rotor and the caliper. So I'll do a little, I couldn't find anything on the internet. All right, so the interference is right on the back side of the rotor surface. So I'll need to take the rotor off and grind down the surface on the spindle in order to allow the rotor to spin freely. Okay, it's close, but as you can hear, even with the rotor bolted down snugly, we've got clearance, and this should take care of that issue. Now we can bolt the calipers back on, and we can go do the same thing to the other side. With that pushed in as hard as I can, no rubbing. I'll take this off. So that is one surface that got ground down, and that's the other surface that gets ground down. So I'll blow them out and then reinstall the calipers.